My parents expected me to surrender my apartment to them after draining their pensions for my sister's fake business. Little did they know I was already secretly moving out. I always knew the other shoe would drop eventually. When you grow up in a family where reality is treated as a polite suggestion rather than a hard fact, you learn to live in a state of constant, low-level anxiety. But I certainly did not expect the explosion to happen over my mother Valerie's notoriously mediocre pot roast. I sat at the dining room table, pushing a dry piece of carrot around my plate. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked away the seconds, each one feeling heavier than the last. I am 33 years old. I work as a financial analyst for a major corporate firm. I spend my days looking at spreadsheets, risk assessments, and cold, hard numbers. Numbers do not lie. Numbers do not manipulate you. Numbers do not ask you for a loan they will never repay. My family, on the other hand, operates entirely on delusions and weaponized guilt. Across the table sat Sloane, my sister, the golden child. She is 29 years old, but she still acts like a teenager who just discovered her parents' credit card. While I was wearing a plain navy blazer from a discount rack, Sloane was practically shimmering in a designer silk blouse that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. Her hair was perfectly blown out, and she had that smug, practiced smile she always wore when she was about to ask for something unreasonable. Sloane was in the middle of pitching her latest grand venture. She called it Serenity Springs Spa. According to her, it was not just a spa. It was a holistic wellness sanctuary designed to realign cellular frequencies and cater to an elite clientele. She threw around corporate buzzwords like she was reading from a bad marketing textbook. She talked about synergy, disruptive wellness, and paradigm shifts. I took a slow sip of my water, trying to wash down the dry meat. It was exhausting. It has always been exhausting. For 33 years, I have been the reliable workhorse. I was the one who got good grades, took out student loans, found a stable job, and built a quiet, independent life. I was the safety net. Sloane was the sparkly show pony. She bounced from one failed business to another. A bedazzled denim boutique. A vegan candle-making company. An organic dog food delivery service. Every single one of them ended in a mountain of debt, and every single time, my parents rushed in to sweep up the broken glass so their precious girl would not cut her feet. My father, Gregory, sat at the head of the table. He was a quiet man, mostly because he had long ago given up trying to argue with my mother. He chewed his food methodically, staring at his plate, nodding whenever Sloane paused for dramatic effect. Valerie, my mother, was practically vibrating with excitement. She looked at Sloane like she was looking at the next Steve Jobs. She did not hear the glaring holes in Sloane's business plan. She did not notice that Sloane had not mentioned a single concrete detail about property zoning, vendor contracts, or liability insurance. All Valerie heard was that her baby girl was going to be a CEO. I kept my mouth shut. I had learned a long time ago that offering practical financial advice to this family was like trying to teach algebra to a golden retriever. It was pointless, and it usually ended with me being yelled at for not being supportive enough. I just wanted to finish my dinner, make a polite excuse about having an early meeting, and go back to my quiet apartment. But then, Valerie cleared her throat. She placed her fork down on her floral placemat and folded her hands together. Her eyes were shining with a terrifying mixture of pride and manic determination. She looked at Gregory, who managed a weak, almost apologetic smile, and then she looked at me. "We have wonderful news," Valerie announced. Her voice was too loud for the small dining room. "We have made a decision as a family." I felt the muscles in my neck tighten. Whenever my mother used the phrase "as a family," it usually meant I was about to lose money, time, or my sanity. I braced myself. "Your father and I have been talking," Valerie continued, her eyes locked onto mine. "And we realize that an opportunity like Serenity Springs Spa does not come around every day. Sloane has such a brilliant vision. It would be a crime not to support her fully." I nodded slowly, keeping my face completely blank. "That is great, Mom. I am sure it will be a learning experience for her." Valerie waved her hand dismissively, irritated by my lack of enthusiasm. "It is going to be an empire, Morgan. And to help her get it off the ground, your father and I have decided to go all in. We are selling the house. The room went dead silent. The ticking of the grandfather clock suddenly sounded like a hammer hitting an anvil. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. This was the house they had lived in for 30 years. It was fully paid off. It was their only real asset. You are selling the house, I repeated, my voice flat. To fund a spa. Not just the house, Sloane chimed in, practically bouncing in her chair. They are cashing out their retirement accounts too. We need significant capital for the cutting-edge equipment and the celebrity marketing campaign. It is an investment in our future. I looked at Gregory. Dad, are you seriously draining your pension for this? Gregory refused to meet my eyes. He picked up his water glass with a slightly trembling hand. It is temporary, Morgan. Once the business turns a profit in the first 6 months, Sloane will pay us back with a 40% return. We have it all mapped out. 40% return in 6 months. The number echoed in my head. As a financial analyst, I knew instantly that this was mathematically impossible for a brick-and-mortar startup. It was not just a bad idea. It was financial suicide. They were jumping out of an airplane without a parachute, completely convinced they could just flap their arms and fly. But I did not argue. I had long since abandoned the role of the family savior. If they wanted to burn their life savings on the altar of Sloane's ego, that was their legal right. I took a deep breath. Well, I wish you all the best. Let me know if you need help packing boxes. Valerie smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. It was a cold, predatory smile. Oh, we will not be needing much help. We are traveling light. Since we are putting everything into the business, we obviously cannot afford to sign a new lease right now. So, we are going to stay with you. The potato I had just eaten turned to ash in my throat. I froze. I am sorry, what did you just say? We are moving into your apartment, Valerie stated. It was not a request. It was an executive order. You have that extra room you use as an office. It is perfectly fine for us. We will just put our bed in there. Sloane leaned forward, swirling the wine in her glass. Actually, Morgan, I was looking at photos of your apartment on Instagram. That office gets great natural light. I am going to need to set up my command center there while I manage the contractors for the spa. We should really paint the walls sage green. It is much better for my creative aura. And you will need to clear out that bulky desk of yours by next weekend. I sat there, completely paralyzed by the sheer audacity of what was happening. They had not asked. They had not considered my privacy, my space, or my life. They had voluntarily set their own house on fire, and now they were demanding the keys to my sanctuary to escape the smoke. Mom, I said, my voice dangerously low. I work from home 3 days a week. That is my actual office. Valerie rolled her eyes, annoyed by my resistance. Oh, do not be so dramatic, Morgan. You can just work from the kitchen counter. We are your parents. We sacrificed everything for you. The least you can do is let us stay for a few months while Sloane gets this off the ground. We are a family. We help each other. A few months. I knew exactly what that meant. A few months would turn into a year. A year would turn into a permanent residency where I would end up paying for their groceries, their utility bills, and Sloane's takeout coffee habits. They were planning to turn my peaceful, independent life into their personal backup generator. I looked at the three of them. Valerie looked impatient. Gregory looked guilty but resigned. Sloane looked entitled. I realized in that exact moment that they did not see me as a person. They saw me as a resource. An ATM with a heartbeat. I picked up my napkin and wiped my mouth. Okay, I said softly. Valerie beamed, instantly satisfied. I knew you would understand. Now, let us talk about paint samples. I left the house 20 minutes later, citing a sudden headache. It was not entirely a lie. The sheer weight of their entitlement was throbbing right behind my eyes. I got into my car, locked the doors, and just sat there in the driveway for a long time. The streetlights flickered in the evening gloom. Rain began to patter against the windshield, blurring the view of the house I had grown up in. The house they were casually throwing away. I pulled out my phone and dialed Kelsey. Kelsey had been my best friend since college. She was the only person who truly understood the toxic ecosystem of my family. She answered on the second ring. Tell me you did not murder anyone, Kelsey said, hearing the heavy silence on my end of the line. They're selling the house, I said. My voice sounded hollow, even to me. They drained their retirement funds. All of it. To fund Sloane's fake spa. Kelsey let out a loud, colorful curse word that I am fairly certain scared her cat. Are they out of their minds? A spa? Sloane cannot even keep a houseplant alive. It gets better, I continued, starting the engine. Because they are putting all their cash into the business, they're homeless. So, my mother announced that she and my father are moving into my spare room. Oh, and Sloane is taking over the space for her creative aura. They want me to clear out my desk by next weekend so they can paint my walls sage green. There was a long pause on the other end. Morgan, please tell me you laughed in their faces. Please tell me you kicked the dining table over. I pulled out onto the dark street, watching the windshield wipers rhythmically clear the rain. No, I did not laugh. I just said okay. Are you crazy? Kelsey yelled. You cannot let them do this. They will suck you dry. They will never leave. You will be paying for their lives until the day you die. I know, I said quietly. As I drove, a very specific, very bitter memory floated to the surface of my mind. It was the summer before my freshman year of college. I had worked 2 jobs all through high school to save up for tuition, putting every paycheck into a joint account my mother managed. 1 week before tuition was due, I went to withdraw the money. The account was practically empty. When I confronted my mother, she cried and said Sloane had an emergency. The emergency was a massive down payment for a retail space for Sloane's bedazzled denim boutique. A boutique that lasted exactly 4 months before going bankrupt. I had to scramble, beg the financial aid office, and take out predatory student loans that took me 10 years to pay off. My parents never apologized. They just said I was the strong one, that I could handle it, while Sloane needed extra help. Morgan? Kelsey said, her voice softening with concern. What are you going to do? You have to set a boundary. You have to tell them no. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. The darkness inside the car felt comforting. I am not going to tell them anything, Kelsey. What does that mean? Do you remember last week? I asked, my voice steady and light. When I told you I had a tour scheduled at that new high-rise building downtown. The one with the strict security and the gated parking garage? Yeah, I signed the lease 3 days ago. Kelsey gasped. You did? But your current apartment. My current lease expires at the end of the month, I explained, feeling a massive weight lift off my chest. I had been planning to upgrade anyway. I just had not mentioned it to my family because I knew they would expect a key or expect me to host their Sunday dinners. When are you moving? Kelsey asked, her voice turning gleeful. I stopped at a red light and stared at the glowing traffic signal. The movers are booked for 7 in the morning on Saturday the 28th. Which, ironically, is the exact same day my mother said they would be bringing their first load of boxes to my current apartment. Kelsey started laughing. It was a loud, brilliant, triumphant sound. You evil genius. You are going to let them show up to an empty apartment. I am going to let them face the consequences of their own choices, I corrected her. For 33 years, I have been the invisible string holding this family together. They want to cut the string to bet everything on Sloane. Fine. But they do not get to tie themselves to my neck on the way down. I am done. When I finally pulled into my apartment complex, the rain had stopped. I walked into my spare office, looked at the walls that Sloane wanted to paint sage green, and felt absolutely nothing but relief. The countdown had officially begun. The next 2 weeks were an exercise in psychological warfare. To execute a clean escape, I had to play the part of the compliant, beaten-down daughter perfectly. I started packing in the dead of night. Kelsey came over every evening with stacks of flattened cardboard boxes and rolls of bubble wrap. We worked in absolute silence, wrapping dishes, boxing up books, and dismantling my life piece by piece. During the day, my apartment looked totally normal. But if you opened a closet door or looked under my bed, it was a fortress of taped-up cardboard. My phone was a constant source of irritation. Valerie texted me at least 10 times a day with demands masquerading as updates. Make sure you clear out the hall closet, she wrote on a Tuesday. Your father needs space for his golf clubs. On Thursday, Sloan chimed in. Sis, I need you to order a standing desk for the office. My chiropractor says sitting is the new smoking. Make sure it is the bamboo finish. I will pay you back when the spa launches. I never replied to the demands. I just sent back simple thumbs-up emojis. It was infuriating, but the secret knowledge of my impending escape kept me sane. I preferred to think of their texts as background noise on a sinking ship. But my calm was severely tested on a Saturday afternoon, exactly 1 week before moving day. I was in the middle of wrapping my winter coats when the intercom buzzed. It was the front desk. Morgan, the concierge, said. Your mother and sister are here. I am sending them up. Panic hit me like a physical punch. I had 4 fully packed, sealed boxes sitting right in the middle of the living room floor. Kelsey, I hissed. They are coming up. Kelsey dropped a roll of tape and sprang into action like a seasoned combat medic. We grabbed the heavy boxes, dragging them frantically across the hardwood floor, and shoved them into the master bathroom. I threw a large pile of dirty laundry over the top of them and yanked the shower curtain closed just as a sharp, rhythmic knocking echoed from my front door. I took a deep breath, smoothed my shirt, and opened the door. Valerie pushed past me without saying hello, holding a yellow tape measure. Sloan trailed behind her, carrying an iced matcha latte and looking around my living room with open distaste. We decided to come measure the office, Valerie announced, already marching down the hallway. We need to know if your father's recliner will fit next to the window. I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms. I did not invite you over. Oh, stop being so sensitive, Valerie snapped, unspooling the tape measure. This is going to be our home soon. We need to prepare. Honestly, Morgan, you have let this place go. It looks so bare. I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from smiling. It looked bare because half my decorations were currently buried under dirty towels in the bathtub. Sloan wandered into the kitchen, opening my refrigerator and sighing. You literally have nothing but condiments and bottled water. Are we going to have to do all the grocery shopping when we move in? Because I am on a strict organic raw food diet right now. You can buy whatever you want with your own money, I said calmly. Sloan rolled her eyes. Do not be stingy. I am launching an empire. You have a steady paycheck. It is called supporting female entrepreneurs. I watched them take over my space, their voices echoing off the walls. Valerie was loudly complaining that my desk was too heavy to move and that I needed to hire someone to haul it to the dump. Sloan was standing in the center of the office, holding her hands up in a square, framing the room. I can just feel the toxic energy in here, Sloan murmured. The sage green paint is not going to be enough. We are going to have to smudge the whole apartment with Palo Santo to clear out your corporate stress vibes. I let them talk. I let them measure. I stood there, invisible in my own home, watching them mentally carve up my life for their own convenience. It was a surreal experience. They were measuring the room, planning where to put their furniture, completely unaware that they were actually measuring the coffin of our relationship. When they finally left an hour later, complaining about the traffic, I locked the deadbolt. Kelsey crept out of the bathroom, dusting lint off her jeans. I take back what I said before, Kelsey muttered, staring at the closed door. You are not an evil genius for leaving them. You are a saint for not throwing them off the balcony. The following Tuesday, I took an extended lunch break from my firm. I drove to the main branch of my bank downtown. This was not a social visit. This was a tactical strike. As a financial analyst, I know exactly how vulnerable a person can be if their personal information is intertwined with irresponsible people. For years, I had kept Valerie and Gregory as my emergency contacts. When I was younger and foolish, I had allowed them to be authorized users on one of my oldest credit cards to help build my credit score. I had taken the card away from them years ago, but their names were technically still in the system. I walked into the sterile, air-conditioned lobby and sat down with a personal banker named Thomas. I need to do a complete audit of all my accounts, I told him, sliding my identification across the mahogany desk. I want to remove any and all authorized users. I want to change my emergency contacts. I want to update my security questions, and I want to put a strict verbal password on my profile so no one can access my information over the phone without it. Thomas typed rapidly on his keyboard. Absolutely. Let us take a look. I see Valerie and Gregory listed here as secondary contacts on your checking account. Shall I remove them? Erase them, I said. My voice was steady. I watched the screen as he clicked the buttons, severing the digital ties that bound me to my family. It felt incredibly liberating. When you grow up as the designated safety net, you are conditioned to believe that setting a boundary is an act of violence. You are taught that saying no makes you a bad daughter. But sitting in that bank chair, looking at the updated statements, I realized that true violence was what they were doing to themselves and expecting me to bleed for it. We also need to discuss fraud alerts, I told Thomas. My family is currently involved in some highly questionable investments. I have reason to believe that when they run out of money, they might try to use my personal information to open new lines of credit. I need the highest level of security monitoring you offer. Thomas looked up, his professional demeanor slipping into genuine concern. We can place a hard freeze on your credit profile with the major bureaus. No new accounts can be opened without a temporary PIN that only you possess. Do it, I said without hesitation. I spent 45 minutes securing my financial borders. By the time I walked out of the bank and into the bright afternoon sun, I was an island. No one could touch my savings. No one could leverage my good name. My credit score was locked inside a vault. As I walked back to my car, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Gregory. Morgan, Sloan needs $300 for a filing fee with the city. Our funds are tied up in escrow for the house sale until Thursday. Can you transfer it to her? I promise we will pay you back. I stopped on the sidewalk. I stared at the message. $300. It was a small amount compared to what they had taken from me in the past. But it was the principle of the thing. They had drained hundreds of thousands of dollars from their own lives, and the moment they hit a minor speed bump, they reflexively reached into my pocket. I typed out a reply. No, I do not have it. I hit send. It was the first time in 33 years I had ever said no to my father without a paragraph of apologies attached to it. The response came 30 seconds later, not from Gregory, but from Valerie. Do not be selfish, Morgan. Your sister is stressed. Transfer the money. I did not reply. I turned off my phone, got into my car, and drove back to work. The firewall was up. Let them burn. 2 days before moving day, I was sitting in my cubicle at the firm, running a risk assessment on a corporate merger when my desk phone rang. I picked it up without checking the caller ID. Morgan speaking. Hey, Morgan. It is me. My stomach plummeted. The voice belonged to Harrison. Harrison was my ex-boyfriend. We had dated for 2 years. He was an aspiring music producer who spent most of his time networking at bars and asking me to cover his portion of the rent. Our relationship ended spectacularly when I walked into our apartment early one afternoon and found him in our bed with a bartender. A bartender who, coincidentally, worked at Sloan's failed vegan candle-making launch party. I gripped the phone tightly. How did you get my office number, Harrison? I called the main directory, he said, his voice dripping with that fake, sleazy charm he always used when he was in trouble. Look, do not hang up. I am not calling to hash out the past. This is about your sister. It is about Sloan. I let out a long, exhausted breath. Whatever you and Sloan are doing, I do not care. Do not contact me again. Wait. Harrison practically shouted into the receiver. Morgan, you need to listen to me. She came to me a few weeks ago asking if I knew any private investors in the music scene who might want to diversify into wellness. I helped her set up a few meetings. And? I asked coldly. Why is this my problem? Because the numbers do not make sense, Morgan. Harrison's voice dropped to an anxious whisper. I saw the pitch deck she gave my contacts. It is completely different from the business plan she told your parents about. And the property she claims she is leasing for the spa? I drove past the address yesterday. I stopped typing. What is there? Nothing, Harrison said. It is a dirt lot behind a strip mall. There is no building. There is no construction. There is just dirt. Morgan, I think she is running a scam. A massive one. I think your parents are giving their money to a ghost. The office around me seemed to fade away. The hum of the air conditioner, the clicking of keyboards, it all vanished. I stared at the blank wall of my cubicle. I need to meet you, Harrison pleaded. I have copies of the documents. You need to see this before your parents lose everything. I closed my eyes. The image of Valerie proudly announcing the sale of their house flashed through my mind. The image of Gregory avoiding my gaze. The absolute arrogance of Sloan standing in my living room, demanding sage green walls. Harrison wanted me to step in. He wanted me to put on the cape, fly in, expose the fraud, and save my parents from the consequences of their own spectacular stupidity. He wanted me to be the responsible one, just like I had always been. Harrison, I said, my voice eerily calm. Yes? Meet me at the coffee shop on 4th Street in an hour. No, I replied. What? Morgan, did you hear what I just said? She is stealing from your parents. She is stealing from my investors. If you believe a crime is being committed, you should contact the authorities, I told him. If you are worried about your own liability for introducing her to investors, you should contact a lawyer. But you do not get to contact me. Morgan, please. My parents made their choice, Harrison. They looked at the documents, they listened to her pitch, and they chose to sell their home. They are adults. Whatever happens next is between them, Sloan, and the police. Do not ever call this number again. I slammed the receiver down. My hands were shaking slightly. I turned back to my computer. For a moment, a wave of intense guilt washed over me. Should I warn them? Should I call Gregory and tell him the address is a dirt lot? I opened a new tab on my browser and accessed the public county property records. I typed in the corporate name Sloan had been using. It took me less than 5 minutes to verify everything Harrison had just said. Serenity Springs Spa did not own any land. There were no active commercial leases under that name in the entire city. The business license was registered to a post office box. It was a total fabrication. A black hole designed to swallow their money. I reached for my cell phone to call my father. But then I stopped. I remembered the $300 text. I remembered the complete lack of respect. If I warned them now, Valerie would just accuse me of being jealous of Sloan's success. They would find a way to justify it. They would drag me into the wreckage, begging me to hire lawyers, begging me to fix it. I put the phone face down on my desk. I closed the property records tab. The fuse was lit and the bomb was going to go off. But for the first time in my life, I was making sure I was safely outside the blast radius. Moving day was in 48 hours. Thank you for watching until part 2 of the story. If you found this story interesting, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment with the name of the city you live in. Every comment helps the video reach a wider audience. Thank you so much. Saturday morning arrived with a thick layer of gray fog hanging over the city. My alarm went off at 5 o'clock, but I was already awake. Kelsey arrived at 5:30 with a tray of black coffees and a box of donuts we were too anxious to eat. The professional movers knocked on my door exactly at 7 o'clock. They were a crew of 3 massive guys who moved with ruthless efficiency. Because Kelsey and I had already boxed and labeled everything, the process was incredibly fast. Within 45 minutes, my living room furniture was wrapped in heavy blue blankets and strapped into the freight elevator. My bed frame was dismantled. The apartment was rapidly transforming into an empty, echoing shell. I was standing in the kitchen, wiping down the counters one last time, when the front door swung open. It was 7:50 in the morning. My parents were not supposed to bring their first load of boxes until noon. But standing in the doorway, completely freezing in their tracks, were Valerie, Gregory, and Sloan. They looked like a bizarre traveling circus. Gregory was dragging 2 heavy vintage leather suitcases. Valerie was clutching a stack of folded velvet curtains. Sloan was holding a large, framed vision board covered in magazine clippings of luxury pools and inspirational quotes. Valerie's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She stared at the empty living room, then at the muscular mover who was currently rolling my refrigerator out the door on a hand truck. Morgan? Valerie finally managed to squeak out. Her voice echoed off the bare walls. What is happening? Where is your furniture? I folded my paper towel, tossed it into the trash bag I was holding, and walked slowly toward the entryway. I kept my posture perfectly straight. I am moving, I said. My voice was calm, almost conversational. Gregory dropped the leather suitcases. The heavy thud shook the floorboards. Moving? What do you mean you were moving? We agreed we were moving into the spare office today. We handed the keys of our house to the new owners yesterday afternoon. You agreed you were moving in, I corrected him gently. You commanded it. I never said yes. Sloane pushed past our mother, her face flushing bright red with sudden, vicious anger. This is a joke, right? You are trying to teach us a lesson because you are bitter and jealous of my company. Well, joke is over, Morgan. Tell these guys to bring the furniture back up. I have a contractor coming at 2 o'clock to look at the office walls. I looked at Sloane. I looked at the vision board in her hands. There was a picture of a private jet glued to the center of it. The truck is going to a secure high-rise building across town, I told her. You will not have the address. My name is no longer on the lease for this unit. In fact, this lease expires completely in exactly 3 days. You can stay here until Tuesday morning, but after that, the property manager will have you escorted out for trespassing. Valerie dropped the velvet curtains. They piled on the floor like a collapsed lung. She rushed forward and grabbed my forearm, her nails digging into my skin. You cannot do this to us. We are your family. We have nowhere else to go. All of our money is tied up in the spa. I looked down at her hand, then looked directly into her terrified eyes. I reached up and slowly peeled her fingers off my arm. Your financial ruin is your own choice, Mom. You chose to sell your house. You chose to drain your retirement. You chose to hand your entire life over to a daughter who has never successfully maintained a job for more than 6 months. You made your bed. Now you have to sleep in it. And you do not get to use my apartment as a mattress. But we are your parents. Gregory shouted, his voice cracking with a desperate kind of grief I had never heard before. Who is going to take care of us? For the first time in 33 years, I looked at my father and felt absolutely zero responsibility. Ask your golden child, I said quietly. I reached into my coat pocket, pulled out my set of keys, and dropped them onto the kitchen island. The metal clattered loudly in the empty room. I walked past them, stepped out into the hallway, and pressed the button for the elevator. I did not look back. The first few days in my new studio apartment were surreal. The building was heavily secured, requiring a key fob just to enter the lobby. It was completely silent. There were no surprise visits. There were no demands for money. There was only the low hum of the central heating and the spectacular view of the city's skyline. I spent the weekend unpacking, organizing my books, and drinking expensive wine with Kelsey on my new balcony. I felt lighter. I felt like I had shed a skin that was suffocating me. But I knew the silence would not last. A bomb that big creates a shockwave, and eventually it was going to rattle my windows. It happened on Wednesday morning. I was sitting at my kitchen island, typing an email for work, when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Gregory's name. I had blocked Valerie and Sloane, but I had left my father unblocked, perhaps out of some lingering, foolish sense of pity. I accepted the call. Hello, Dad. Morgan. His voice was breathless, panicked, and incredibly small. It sounded like he was hiding in a closet. Please. You have to help me. I am at the bank. I closed my laptop. What happened? They froze the accounts, he whispered, his voice trembling. The joint accounts I share with your mother and Sloane. The teller said they flagged the accounts for suspicious activity. Morgan, the money is gone. What do you mean the money is gone? I asked, my analyst brain instantly taking over. The funds from the house sale? All of it, Gregory choked out. Almost $500,000. The bank manager said there were multiple massive wire transfers initiated yesterday. They were sent to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. They locked down what was left, which is basically nothing. I cannot even buy a tank of gas. A cold chill washed over my arms. I had known Sloane's business was a scam, but I thought she was just going to squander the money locally on expensive clothes and fake marketing. I did not realize she was executing a highly sophisticated international embezzlement scheme. Where is Sloane? I asked. She said she was going to a wellness retreat in the mountains to detox her chakras before the grand opening, Gregory said. She has had her phone turned off since Sunday. Morgan, please. Can you wire me $1,000? Just to get us through the week until we sort this out? We are staying at a cheap motel by the highway, and they are demanding payment for the next night. I closed my eyes. The image of my elderly father standing in a bank lobby, totally penniless, hit me hard. The conditioning of 33 years screamed at me to open my banking app, to send the money, to fix it. But then I remembered Harrison's warning. I remembered the dirt lot. I remembered Valerie calling me selfish. Dad, listen to me very carefully, I said, making my voice as hard and flat as a stone. I am not sending you money. Not $1,000. Not a single dime. Morgan, please, he sobbed. Stop crying and listen to me. I barked, the sudden volume startling even myself. Sloan is not at a wellness retreat. She stole your money. She wired it offshore so you could not get it back. She is a criminal, Dad. No, she is just confused. She made a mistake. I slammed my hand onto the kitchen counter. Stop defending her. She stole everything you have. Now you are going to walk out of that bank, and you are going to walk directly to the nearest police station, and you are going to file a fraud report against your own daughter. If you do not do that, you will never see a penny of that money again. I cannot do that to my baby girl, Gregory whispered miserably. Then you can sleep in your car, I said. I hung up the phone. I sat in the silence of my beautiful, safe apartment, my heart hammering against my ribs. I had just abandoned my father to the wolves. It felt terrible. But it also felt incredibly, profoundly necessary. The shockwave hit me directly the very next day. I walked out of my corporate office building at 6 o'clock in the evening, my mind focused on picking up some Thai takeout. As I crossed the plaza toward the parking garage, a man stepped out from behind a concrete pillar, directly into my path. He was in his late 50s, wearing a sharp, custom-tailored suit that looked expensive but slightly rumpled, as if he had been sleeping in it. He held a thick leather briefcase. Morgan? He asked. His voice was deep and gravelly. I stopped, instantly assessing the distance to the building security guard. Who are you? My name is Donovan Pierce, the man said, keeping his hands visible to show he was not a threat. I am a commercial real estate developer. Or, at least, I was. Until I invested $500,000 into Serenity Springs Spa. My breath caught in my throat. I stared at him. Harrison had mentioned private investors, but standing face to face with one of Sloan's victims made the reality of the situation terrifyingly tangible. I have nothing to do with my sister's business, I said quickly, taking a step back. I have not spoken to her. I do not have your money. I know you do not, Donovan said gently. I have had a team of private investigators looking into your sister for the past 3 weeks. I know you cut ties with your family. I know you moved out to avoid them. I am not here to sue you, Morgan. I am here to ask for your help. He unlatched his leather briefcase right there on the sidewalk and pulled out a massive, heavily tabbed manila folder. He held it out to me. Take a look, he urged. I hesitated, then took the folder. I opened it. The first page was a background check photograph. It was a picture of Sloan, but her hair was dyed jet black, and she was wearing thick, fake reading glasses. The name printed under the photo was Natasha Collins. Flip the page, Donovan instructed. I turned the page. Another photo of Sloan. This time, blonde hair extensions, heavy spray tan. The name was Monica Vance. Next page. Auburn hair, conservative business suit. Bianca Sterling. She has been busy, Donovan said, his voice tightening with anger. Natasha scammed 3 families in Seattle out of $200,000 with a fake organic catering company. Monica burned a group of tech investors in Portland for $300,000 with a phantom app. Bianca destroyed a small community in San Diego with a fraudulent charity fund. She moves from state to state, changes her aesthetic, targets trusting people, bleeds them dry, and disappears. I stared at the documents, my financial analyst brain processing the sheer scale of the fraud. This was not a girl making bad business decisions. This was a calculated, predatory sociopath. She always uses her family as the initial bait, Donovan continued. She convinces her parents to invest their life savings. It creates a false sense of legitimacy. Other investors look and say, well, if her own parents trust her with their house, it must be a sure thing. She uses your parents as human shields, Morgan. And when the house of cards collapses, she leaves them holding the bag. I felt physically sick. My hands trembled as I closed the folder. Why are you showing me this? If you have all this proof, go to the FBI. I already did, Donovan said. The FBI field office has an active case file. But white-collar fraud is notoriously difficult to prosecute when the money is moved offshore. They need a timeline. They need someone on the inside who can testify to her patterns, her access to bank accounts, her manipulation tactics. They need someone who is not blinded by family loyalty. He looked at me with a desperate, heavy expression. The agent in charge wants to speak with you. Tomorrow morning. I looked down at the folder in my hands. The weight of 33 years of resentment, of stolen college funds, of ruined birthdays, and of pure, unadulterated exploitation settled in my chest. Sloan had not just ruined my parents. She had destroyed the lives of strangers. I looked back up at Donovan Pierce. Tell the agent I will be there at 8 in the morning. When I arrived at work on Friday morning, there was a heavy, expensive-looking envelope sitting squarely in the middle of my desk. I picked it up. The return address belonged to a high-profile law firm known for aggressive defense tactics. I sliced the envelope open with my letter opener and pulled out a thick stack of legal paper. It was a formal cease and desist order. The document accused me of malicious defamation, tortious interference with business contracts, and emotional distress. It demanded that I immediately cease making any disparaging remarks about Serenity Springs Spa or its founder, and threatened to sue me for millions of dollars in damages if I spoke to any investors, law enforcement agencies, or media outlets. Sloan was getting scared. She knew the walls were closing in, and she was using the stolen money to hire pitbull lawyers to muzzle anyone who could expose her. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text message from Valerie. She must have borrowed Gregory's phone, since I had blocked her number. The text was a massive block of chaotic, misspelled words. How could you do this? Sloan told us you called her investors and lied to them out of pure jealousy. The bank is investigating us because of your lies. You are trying to destroy your sister because you are miserable and alone. Retract everything right now, or I swear you are no longer my daughter. I read the text twice. My mother was sitting in a cheap motel room, her entire life savings stolen by her favorite child, and she was still blindly attacking me to protect the thief. The level of delusion was terrifying. It was a sickness that could not be cured. I did not reply to the text. Instead, I picked up the cease and desist letter, walked over to the office shredder, and fed it slowly into the machine, listening to the satisfying sound of the paper being ripped to shreds. I sat down at my computer, opened a blank Word document, and started typing. I did not go to my FBI meeting empty-handed. I had spent the entire previous night and most of that morning compiling a comprehensive, 50-page timeline. I used every skill I had learned as a financial analyst. I documented every single time Sloan had asked for money over the past 15 years. I detailed the exact dates Valerie had drained my college accounts. I listed the names of every failed LLC Sloan had ever registered. I mapped out the psychological manipulation tactics, the fake emergencies, and the blatant lies. I printed the 50 pages, put them in a binder, and walked out of my office. The FBI field office was intimidating. It smelled like stale coffee and floor wax. I sat across from Special Agent Miller, a woman with sharp eyes and absolutely no patience for nonsense. Donovan Pierce sat quietly in the corner of the room. I handed Agent Miller the binder. She opened it, scanning the first few pages. Her eyebrows raised slightly in a silent display of professional respect. "This is incredibly thorough," Agent Miller said. "We have been trying to trace the initial seed money for the Serenity Springs fraud." "Check page 12, I told her. "You will find the exact dates my parents liquidated their retirement portfolios and the routing numbers for the joint accounts Sloan had access to." Agent Miller flipped to page 12. She nodded slowly. "We have a problem, Morgan. We know she moved the funds to the Cayman Islands on Tuesday. We suspect she is preparing to flee the country. But she uses burner phones and cash. We have a flag on her real passport, but if she uses one of her aliases, She might slip through a regional airport before we can lock down her location. I leaned back in the cold metal chair. I thought about Sloane. I thought about how sloppy she actually was beneath her glamorous veneer. Sloane was not a criminal mastermind. She was an opportunist who relied on the stupidity of others. She was vain, she was lazy, and she loved luxury. She will not use a regional airport, I said confidently. She hates flying commercial. She hates small planes. If she is running, she is going to fly first class out of a major international hub, and she is going to wait for her flight in a 5-star hotel lounge. Agent Miller sighed. That narrows it down to about 50 luxury hotels near the 3 closest international airports. Without a digital footprint, we cannot find her in time. I stared at the blank wall behind the agent. A memory sparked in the back of my mind. A digital footprint. Give me your laptop, I said. Agent Miller hesitated for a fraction of a second before sliding her laptop across the table. Years ago, when smartphones first became popular, Valerie had insisted on creating a shared family cloud account so she could easily share vacation photos with everyone. It was incredibly insecure, using a password that was just Gregory's birth year and the family dog's name. I had logged out of it on my devices ages ago because it was annoying, but I knew for a fact that Sloane still used it. Sloane was too lazy to manage her own digital storage. She used the family cloud to back up her contacts, her notes, and, most importantly, her email receipts. I typed in the web address for the cloud service. I entered Valerie's email. I typed in the password. The screen loaded, and the family dashboard appeared. I clicked on the recent email sync folder. My heart started hammering against my ribs. There it was. Sloane had used a burner phone to book her escape, but she had foolishly linked that phone's backup system to the family cloud out of sheer habit. Look at this, I said, turning the laptop so Agent Miller could see. It was an email receipt from an airline. A one-way, first-class ticket to Buenos Aires, Argentina. The flight was scheduled to depart at 4 o'clock this afternoon. The passenger name was listed as Bianca Sterling. Agent Miller leaned forward, her eyes scanning the screen rapidly. She is using the San Diego alias. Argentina has a complicated extradition treaty. If she lands there with that kind of cash, she could disappear forever. I clicked on the next email in the folder. It was a confirmation receipt from the Grand Marquis Hotel, an obscenely expensive luxury hotel located exactly 2 miles from the international airport. The reservation was also under the name Bianca Sterling. Checkout time was listed as 1 o'clock this afternoon. I checked my watch. It was 11:30 in the morning. We have her, Donovan said from the corner of the room, his voice thick with emotion. You actually found her. Agent Miller stood up immediately, grabbing her suit jacket from the back of her chair. She grabbed her radio. I am dispatching a team to the Grand Marquis right now. We need local police to lock down the exits. Wait, I said, standing up. I want to go. Agent Miller shook her head firmly. Absolutely not. This is a federal apprehension of a flight risk suspect. It is completely out of the question. She knows my face, I argued, my voice sharp and unyielding. If she sees a team of people in cheap suits walking into a luxury lobby, her survival instincts will kick in and she will bolt through the kitchen. She has fake IDs and cash. She will vanish. But if she sees me, her ego will not let her run. She will stop to gloat. She will stop to yell at me. I can stall her. Agent Miller stared at me. She weighed the tactical advantage against the protocol violations. Finally, she nodded. You stay exactly 10 feet away from her, Agent Miller ordered. You keep her talking. The second my team moves in, you hit the floor. Do you understand me? I nodded. I understood perfectly. I was going to be the bait. But this time, I was pulling the trap myself. The lobby of the Grand Marquis Hotel was a cavernous space filled with imported Italian marble, massive crystal chandeliers, and the hushed murmurs of the extremely wealthy. I walked through the revolving glass doors, scanning the room. Agent Miller and 3 plainclothes officers had entered through the side doors and were lingering near the elevator banks, blending in with the businessmen. I spotted her immediately. Sloane was standing at the VIP concierge desk. She was wearing oversized designer sunglasses inside the building, a pristine white cashmere coat, and holding a champagne flute. Her massive, expensive leather suitcases were piled at her feet. She was arguing with the concierge. Even from 40 feet away, I could hear the shrill, entitled pitch of her voice. "What do you mean the card is declining?" she demanded, slamming a black credit card onto the marble counter. "Run it again. Manually. Do you know who I am?" I pulled my cell phone out of my pocket. I dialed Gregory's number. He answered on the first ring. "Morgan?" he asked, his voice shaking. "Do not say a word," I whispered into the phone. "Just listen to the monster you created." I muted my microphone, put the phone on speaker, and slipped it into the breast pocket of my blazer. Then I walked directly toward the concierge desk. "Having trouble paying the bill, Bianca?" I asked loudly. Sloane spun around. She lowered her designer sunglasses, her eyes widening in pure shock. "Morgan? What the hell are you doing here? How did you find me?" "You forgot to log out of Mom's cloud account," I said, stopping exactly 10 feet away from her. "You always were terrible at the details. It is why your businesses always fail." Sloane's shock instantly morphed into vicious arrogance. She laughed, a sharp, ugly sound that echoed in the marble lobby. The concierge looked extremely uncomfortable and took a step back. "My businesses did not fail, Morgan," Sloane sneered, tossing her hair over her shoulder. "They functioned exactly as they were supposed to. By stealing from innocent people?" I asked, keeping my voice loud enough for the phone in my pocket to pick up every word. "By stealing from our parents? They sold their house for you, Sloane. They gave you their retirement." Sloane rolled her eyes dramatically. "Oh, please. Stop being so dramatic. They gave it to me because they are stupid. They are gullible, pathetic people who wanted to believe their favorite daughter was a genius. It was embarrassingly easy to take their money." In my pocket, I could hear a faint, muffled gasp coming from the phone speaker. Valerie was listening. "You hate them," I realized, stating the fact plainly. "You do not just use them. You actually despise them." "I despise how boring they are," Sloane spat, taking a step toward me. "Just like I despise you. Perfect Morgan. Responsible Morgan. Sitting in your little cubicle, living your pathetic little life. I am going to Argentina. I am going to live like a queen on their dimes. And they will probably still blame you for it because they love me more than they will ever love you." She smiled. It was a terrifying, hollow smile. "You're right," I said softly. "They do love you more. But the FBI does not care about love." Sloane frowned. "What?" I raised my hand and snapped my fingers. Agent Miller and the 3 plainclothes officers converged on the concierge desk with terrifying speed. Before Sloane could even drop her champagne flute, an officer grabbed her wrist, twisted her arm behind her back, and slammed her face first onto the cold marble counter. The crystal flute shattered on the floor. "Bianca Sterling, also known as Sloane, you are under arrest for wire fraud, interstate commerce violations, and grand larceny," Agent Miller announced loudly, pulling a pair of heavy silver handcuffs from her belt. Sloane screamed. It was not a scream of fear. It was a scream of pure, infantile rage. "Get your hands off me. I am a CEO. Morgan, tell them to stop." "Mommy." The clicking sound of the handcuffs locking around her wrists echoed through the lobby. It was the best sound I had ever heard. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I unmuted the microphone. "Did you hear that, Mom?" I asked the phone. There was a long, agonizing silence on the other end of the line. And then, a sound that I will never forget. It was Valerie wailing. A deep, guttural, shattered sound of a woman whose entire reality had just collapsed into dust. I hung up the phone. I watched as the agents dragged Sloane toward the exit, her designer shoes slipping on the marble, her screams fading into the noise of the city street. 2 weeks pass. The dust began to settle, leaving behind a landscape of total devastation. Sloane was denied bail. The federal prosecutors hit her with a mountain of evidence, including the audio recording from the hotel lobby. They managed to freeze the offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands before she could launder the money through shell companies. The authorities informed Donovan Pierce and the other investors that they would likely recover a significant portion of their stolen funds after the legal proceedings finished. My parents were not so lucky, because they had willingly transferred their money to Sloan under the guise of a business investment, and because Sloan had immediately used a massive chunk of their specific funds to pay off her previous fraud victims to keep them quiet, their money was gone. Completely incinerated. Valerie and Gregory were officially bankrupt. They had moved out of the cheap motel and were currently sleeping on an inflatable mattress in the unfinished basement of my aunt's house. I was sitting at my kitchen island on a Sunday morning, drinking coffee, when my phone rang. I had unblocked Valerie's number the day before. I knew the call was coming. "Morgan," Valerie said. Her voice was completely stripped of its usual arrogance. It sounded raspy, weak, and incredibly old. "Hello, Mom. We have nothing, Morgan." Valerie started to cry. A pathetic, whimpering sound. "The lawyers say we will not get anything back. Your aunt says we have to move out by the end of the month. We cannot afford an apartment. We cannot afford groceries. Please. I know you have that beautiful new studio. You have the space. Let us stay with you. Just for a little while. I am so sorry. We were wrong. Please save us." I listened to her beg. I looked around my quiet, sunlit apartment. I felt the absolute peace of my solitude. I opened a drawer in my kitchen island and pulled out a thick manila envelope I had prepared the night before. "Mom, I have mailed a package to Aunt's house for you and Dad. It should arrive tomorrow afternoon." Valerie gasped, a spark of desperate hope returning to her voice. "A package? Is it a check? Are you going to help us with a deposit?" "No," I said smoothly. "It is an invoice." "An invoice? For what?" I used my financial software, I explained, keeping my tone perfectly professional. I went back through 15 years of bank statements. I tracked every single time you emptied my accounts. Every time I paid your utility bills because you gave your cash to Sloan. Every credit card debt I absorbed for you. I calculated the exact total, adjusted for average market inflation and standard interest rates. The line was dead silent. "The total is exactly $200,000, I told her. "Morgan," Valerie whispered in horror. "We cannot pay that. We are ruined. Why are you doing this to us?" "I am not asking you to pay it," I replied. "I know you do not have it. I am sending it to you so you can hold it in your hands. I want you to look at that number. I want you to understand that I have already paid for your mistakes. I have already bought my freedom. I was your safety net for my entire life, and you took it for granted. You burned your own house down, Mom. Do not come knocking on my door asking for a fire extinguisher." I pressed the end call button. I went into my phone settings and permanently blocked her number, and then my father's number. I severed the last invisible string. A few months rolled by, bringing the crisp, cool air of autumn to the city. The legal case against Sloan became a massive media spectacle. Reporters dubbed her the Wellness Wolf, broadcasting her various aliases and mugshots across the national news networks. Valerie and Gregory eventually had to enter a protective program because so many angry investors were tracking them down, wrongly believing they had hidden Sloan's stolen money. I never spoke to them again. My life, surprisingly, flourished in the aftermath of the explosion. Donovan Pierce's legal team was so impressed with my forensic accounting skills during the FBI investigation that they offered me a highly lucrative consulting contract. I now spend my weekends helping law firms track down hidden assets for other families who have been victimized by financial predators. There were a few pathetic attempts at reconciliation from the ghosts of my past. Harrison showed up at my apartment building lobby one evening, holding a bouquet of cheap gas station flowers, claiming he wanted to apologize for his part in the mess and asking if I wanted to get a drink. I did not even speak to him. I just looked at the security guard, pointed at Harrison, and walked into the private elevator. I finally understood that peace is not something you find. It is something you ruthlessly protect. One evening, I sat on my balcony with my laptop. The city lights sparkled below me like a sea of diamonds. I opened an internet forum dedicated to survivors of toxic families. I had spent years reading other people's stories, feeling validated by their pain. It was time to share my own. I typed out the whole story. the mediocre pot roast, the sage green walls, the dirt lot, the marble lobby, the $200,000 invoice. I hit publish, closed the laptop, and took a deep breath of the cold night air. Sometimes, doing the right thing looks incredibly selfish to the people who are used to using you. I walked away from my flesh and blood when they lost everything, choosing my own peace over their survival. So tell me, am I the villain in this story, or was I right to let them drown in the storm they created? Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please consider hitting that button and ringing the bell so you won't miss any future stories.